testing, testing. Can you hear me? I don't hear me.
You have to speak closer and
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, is that better?
way better.
Okay, good. Good to know.
Yeah, they don't pick up the background noise. You have to actually
Right.
almost eat the mic.
This one's not on, so I'll just move it out of the way. Otherwise, right, if we turn them both on, we'll get feedback.
Yeah.
Nobody wants that.
Do you want me to put that TV on the, or the computer on top of that bar?
It's fine where it is. Thanks, though. Okay, I got 1:30. Oh, I need my intro. Where are we today? Give me just a second. There we go. Okay. Are we recording? Today's the first. Okay. I will go ahead and call to order this hearing of November 11th, 2022 in the matter of variance 22-002, SEPA 22006, SPR site plan review 22006, and critical area permit 22001. My name is Joe Turner. I'm the hearings officer for the City of Woodland. My role as the hearings officer is to conduct public hearings and make decisions about certain land use matters in the city. In making those decisions, I'm required to apply the city's existing laws. I'm not a policymaker. I don't have the authority to vary from or change the laws. If you think that the law need to be changed, you can work with City Council and Planning Commission to do that. But state law requires that this application be judged based on the laws in effect when the application was filed. As a hearings examiner, I'm to provide an unbiased decision maker. I believe I am unbiased with regard to this application. I have not had any pre-hearing contact with any of the parties regarding the substance of the application, and I don't have any interest in the subject property or any of the surrounding properties. But anyone has the right to challenge my impartiality, to argue that I'm biased in one way or another, and you can do that when it's your opportunity to testify. Procedure will follow. I'll start by asking staff to summarize their staff report, copies of which are available on the city's website. Then the applicant will have an opportunity to present their proposal and respond to the staff report. If anyone else appears and wants to say anything about this application, they may do so. Once everyone has had an initial opportunity to testify, I will give staff and the applicant an opportunity to respond to the testimony that was offered. If that response includes any new evidence, I will give everyone a chance to respond to the new evidence. Otherwise, I'll close the public portion of the hearing and announce what I'm going to do. Generally, I will issue a written decision within about 2 weeks after the close of the public record. I'll send that decision to the city, and the city will send it to parties of record. So anybody who testifies orally or in writing before the close of the record or who requests a copy of my decision can receive one when it's issued. When you testify, please, in person, please come on up to the podium. Please begin your testimony by stating your name and your full mailing address. If you represent someone else, please say so. Please spell your last name so I get it right. Currently there's nobody online, so we don't need to address that. But that concludes my introduction. Mr. Kaiser?
Thank you. My name is David Lucchese. For the record, I am the Associate Planner with the City of Woodland. I will be presenting today on the Guild Road Industrial Development Project. Travis Goddard may have a few words to speak as well after I am finished as well. He is the Community Development Director. So this is a public hearing for the Guild Road Industrial Development. There are 3 applications and 3 permits at play here: a critical area permit, a site plan review permit, as well as a major variance permit. Just to give a brief overview of the location. The subject property is one parcel along the southern side of Guild Road across from the Guild Clady Centennial Park. It is currently a vacant lot with no historical development or structures on site. I do have here a map just to give you an idea of the surrounding uses. To the immediate west of the property is a single-family home. A RV and boat storage business is to the east, and across the street is the private park operated by the Port of Woodland. In the near vicinity, there is also a in-progress light industrial development being developed by the Port of Woodland, as well as further single-family homes, RV storage sites, and various other light industrial uses. Going across the entirety of the street frontage within the property's footprint is Gorg Slough, a fish-bearing stream, and it is historically used as part of the Consolidated Diking District Number 2's stormwater system and eventually feeds the Columbia River pumping station. This slough has not been heavily accessible to fish passage since the construction of the dike in 1935 due to that pumping station. There are two access drives on the property currently, one on the eastern side of the property and one on the western side. In regards to the site plan review application, the project generally can be approved with conditions based on my findings. Right here we do have the proposed site plan. As you can see, the proposed site plan is for two during the first and second phase, which I believe per the application materials are planned to be constructed together, will comprise of two 12,500 square foot buildings with an additional 12,500 square foot building and an approximately 12,000 square foot yard to be constructed as a potential phase 3. The total site is 4.65 acres, or 202,767 square feet in area, with a proposed building area of 25,000 square feet for the first two phases, an additional 12,500 square feet with the phase 3 building, and an additional approximately 12,000 square feet with the phase 3 yard. It is currently a vacant lot with no current structures or uses identified, with an industrial comprehensive plan designation and a light industrial zoning designation. The application proposes manufacturing, warehousing, and office uses on site which are permittable within the light industrial zoning designation. Regarding street and sidewalk improvements, Guild Road is primarily undeveloped. The project is conditioned on providing improvements that meet the City of Woodland engineering standards. Those will include curb, gutter, sidewalk, and half-street improvements per the engineering comments provided. The proposed development, as shown on the site plan, generally meets setback requirements. As a note, the structures have been proposed to be placed on as close to the rear lot line as permitted under our setback requirements. That would be 10 feet, in order to reduce any potential impacts on the Gorg Slough that goes across the front of the property. Similarly, per my calculations, which have been provided in our staff report and are on the screen now, a total of 39 parking spaces would be required for this location, for this proposed development. And the applicant, through their site plan, has proposed a total of 46 parking spaces. So this would meet our parking requirements under Chapter 1756 of the Woodland Municipal Code. And regarding loading requirements, the applicant has identified that 4 loading bays will be provided for deliveries and unloading and loading of materials, which generally does meet our requirements under Chapter 17.56 of the Woodland Municipal Code for all proposed phases. With that in mind, several public agencies have provided comments through the SEPA comment review, the SEPA review period. The Port of Woodland provided comments regarding their perceived lack of truck parking, impacting the proper flow of traffic along Guild Road and illegal parking on Guild Road, as well as the Diking District's request to upsize the culverts without the Diking District maintaining the culverts and drainage ditch at the time. Staff from SGA Engineering, the applicant and owner's engineering consultant, responded noting that the project will have ample room for truck parking on site and a higher volume of semi-truck traffic for the proposed development was not expected. They also noted that the applicant did reach out to the Consolidated Diking District, and the Diking District declined the opportunity to own and maintain the slough and culverts, and that the applicant accepted this response and upsizing of the culvert and will maintain the area. The Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife also provided comments on the project, the proposed development as well. Their primary concerns included the adequate protection of existing Oregon white oaks, both during and following construction, to which the applicant's environmental consultant, Environmental Land Services, responded confirming their intentions to utilize best management practices to protect Oregon white oaks, both during and following construction to the best of their ability. The Department of Fish and Wildlife also expressed concerns over the proposed riparian habitat buffer reduction, specifically that compensatory mitigation would be required should the buffer be reduced beyond 222 feet per their new standards, and that they strongly recommended not permitting a buffer of less than 100 feet. Environmental Land Services responded, stating that their request for buffer reduction was based on the on-site conditions and referred to their provided mitigation plan. They also noted that the pollutant removal functions that will be replaced by a wet pond as a part of their stormwater system. The second application that is being processed and considered today is a critical area permit. The applicant has requested a variable buffer reduction of between 75 and 87% along the riparian area. That would mean it would result in a riparian habitat buffer that is between 26 and 50 feet. I did do a rough calculation of the existing 200-foot buffer in blue and a potentially a 50% reduced buffer that staff can approve through the critical area permit process, which would be a 100-foot buffer in red. As a note, the proposed buffer reduction is greater than the 50% permitted through a critical area permit and requires a major variance as well. So Several impacts were identified as a result of this new development. This includes the addition of new impervious surface within the riparian habitat buffer, the construction of a new crossing over Gorg Slough to replace the 2 existing access points, and new impervious surface within the critical root zone of 4 Oregon white oak trees. Additionally, 11 redwood trees will be removed as a part of this proposed development. The applicant has provided a mitigation plan that is designed to mitigate against these impacts. That mitigation plan includes the restoration of 0.019 acres of slough in order to mitigate the removal of the existing crossings. That would be located in approximately the location of those crossings. They will also be installing 2 26-inch culverts to replace the existing 2 12-inch culverts that will assist with proper flow during storm events. Invasive species specifically black bays, will be removed, and buffer enhancement projects impacting 0.84 acres of buffer on both sides of the slough banks will be provided as well to mitigate against encroachment on the buffer, as well as installation of habitat features and the on-site planting of Oregon white oaks at a 6-to-1 ratio for impacts to the existing 4 Oregon white oaks, and the installation and planting of Douglas fir trees on-site at a 2-to-1 ratio for impacts to the on-site redwoods. The Woodland Municipal Code requires that potential applicants avoid all impacts to the extent possible and compensate for unavoidable alteration to a critical area buffer when avoidance and minimization is not possible. The applicant has acknowledged proper mitigation sequences and has taken steps to avoid and minimize whatever impacts they can. Furthermore, the Woodland Municipal Code does require mitigation to be on-site and in-kind as much as possible. All proposed mitigation is on-site within the existing Gorg Slough banks. Most of the mitigation measures are in kind, except for the removal of 11 non-native redwood trees, while they will be providing 22 native trees to mitigate against that removal, which is acceptable in the city's code. The director may allow the standard habitat buffer width to be reduced in accordance with an approved critical area report, as well as the best available science on a case-by-case basis when it is determined that a smaller area is adequate. The applicant is asking for a buffer reduction of 75 to 84%, which does require a major variance. In order to approve a riparian habitat buffer with reduction, the city does have to find that the critical area report provides a sound rationale for a reduced buffer based on the best available science. The provided critical area report notes that the slough banks are at a high grade and undisturbed riparian vegetation is limited to the slough banks. The report also notes that the southern buffer is primarily regularly mowed grasses, providing limited riparian function to the slough, and the enhancement of the south slough bank with native species will create a corridor along the existing slough that will provide more robust function that currently exists. This meets this criteria per our review. Proposed buffer, a proposed riparian buffer reduction also requires that the existing buffer area is either well vegetated or that it will be significantly enhanced with native species and has less than a 10% slope. The proposed development meets this criteria based off the critical area report. The existing buffer area does have a slope of less than 10% and is not well vegetated. However, the proposed mitigation plan will significantly improve on existing conditions through the removal of invasive species, replacement with a native seed mix, enhancement of the slough banks, as well as the addition of habitat features. The city also must find that no direct or indirect short-term or long-term adverse impacts to habitats will result from the proposed development. The applicant has provided a mitigation plan that will substantially improve the riparian functions within the slough. The provision of stormwater collection and quality control systems will also assist in maintaining proper quality control for stormwater that may potentially enter the slough from the subject property, and ensure that those cleansing impacts from the grass are mitigated against. Furthermore, a 5-year monitoring program of the buffer and the habitat zone is required to be included with a buffer reduction request through the critical areas permit process. The applicant has provided a 5-year monitoring program of the buffer and the habitat area that includes monitoring and reporting in years 1, 2, 3, and 5. The counting and assessment of the on-site Oregon white oaks as part of that monitoring activity, as well as establishment of 8 photo sections in order to further the goal of monitoring the site. This meets the city's standards per staff report. And finally, the final criteria for a buffer reduction within the Woodland Municipal Code and the Critical Areas Ordinance is that in no case shall the standard buffer width be reduced by more than 50% using the provision. And the applicant has acknowledged that, and the major variance is required for a buffer reduction of over 50%, which is what the major variance itself is requesting. So in order for the hearing examiner to grant a major variance, the application must meet several criteria. First, that such a variance is necessary because of special circumstances or conditions relating to the size, shape, topography, location, or surroundings of the subject property, to provide it with the uses and the rights and privileges permitted to other properties in the vicinity and in the zone. Just to start out with, the Gorg Slough separates the usable property from all street access and inconveniences any future development of the site, as it runs across the entire frontage of this specific lot. The primary use would be for warehousing and distribution of product, which is a consistent use with the surrounding area and the zoning district. Moving forward, the applicant has already made significant changes to work within the existing geography and size of the site and to minimize the required buffer reduction. This includes a minor reduction in building size, the relocation of proposed buildings to the rear lot line, and the proposed consolidation of access into a single driveway in the center of the property. However, the one note is that staff has found that the applicant would likely be able to make minor modifications to the design to accommodate a set 40-foot riparian habitat buffer, So the staff is recommending the variance be approved with a reduced 40-foot set buffer rather than the variable reduced 26-foot to 50-foot buffer as proposed. The second criteria that must be found to be true is that the granting of such variance will not be materially detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to the property or improvements in the vicinity and zone in which the subject property is situated. The intent of this criteria is to ensure developments approved utilizing variances do not cause immeasurable harm to the community, the public, and private improvements to the area and the city. Gorg Slough is located approximately 20 to 30 feet from the existing Guild Road. The proposed project is conditioned on the implementation of a 5-year maintenance schedule. Sorry. And the project will also provide curb and gutter to Guild Road, improving the road itself and not causing a detriment to it. Furthermore, the upsizing of the culverts from 12 inches to 36 inches will improve peak flow through the slough and minimize flood risk. And the removal of the 2 existing entrances and the consolidation into a single access point will further improve storage capacity of the slough. On-site detention of the stormwater will also minimize any stormwater runoff into the slough from the proposed development and provide pollutant removal functions. In conclusion, the 3 applications being considered are the critical area permit, CAP 22001, the site plan review, SPR 22006, and the major variance, VAR 22002. Staff has recommended the critical area permit and site plan review be approved with the conditions stated in our staff report. And staff has also recommended the approval of a major variance to the city's critical area ordinance to permit a reduced 40-foot riparian habitat buffer based on the site-specific conditions present on the site, existing conditions, and approval criteria. With that in mind, do you have any questions?
Just a couple. Page 11 of your staff report, just potential typo, but really minor, find it. It says in finding 35, 1, 2, third bullet, the applicant will, the enhancement plan will include northern side of the slope will be enhanced along the bank slope. Won't both sides be enhanced?
Yeah, both sides.
Okay.
That might have been a typo on my hand.
That's what I assumed. Just wanted to clarify that. And page 19, conflict regarding EV parking, electric vehicle parking. It seems to conflict with page 14. 19 says there's 3 vehicles, EV spaces required. 14 says there's 5, 6. There's what? 4?
It's 10% of parking,
Which
so I
would be-
believe that would be 5.
Okay. And I'll have to check the conditions and see which number got
Yeah.
into the condition. And then, do you have any response to the DFW's latest October 31st letter?
They did provide a response. It's been emailed to you. I also have a paper copy here for you to submit into the record
From the applicant?
from the
or-
applicant.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, I didn't see the email before I left.
Yep, it's fine. Came in.
So, Mr. Examiner, I'd like to give you a quick input on this. So, I've been dealing with this site and
Mr. Goddard,
pre-application
can you
conference.
get your name and?
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Travis Goddard, Community Development Director for the City of Woodland. I have been dealing with this site for several years now, and we, as soon as COVID lockdown ended, we actually did a site visit with the Department of Fish and Wildlife and some other state agencies and the local tribes representative. We walked this site, we walked the neighborhood, as much of the slough as we could get access to, and we had a long discussion about this. The original mapping of the slough is from a late 1800s map, and that was prior to the construction of the original dike around the bottoms in 1935. And so we know that this has been disconnected for a significant amount of time. And we started having these philosophical questions about how you could change the underlying mapping, considering it was a historical map and they're tasked with trying to restore natural conditions and fish and wildlife habitat. And it was generally understood that this was kind of a situation that we wouldn't really be able to come with a simple solution for. And the gentleman who's been reviewing this, Isaac, was not part of that conversation, and neither was David at the time, so there's a lot of history going on here. And normally I would not be supportive of a major variance, especially one of this magnitude, but given the constraints with this property and the fact that it is probably unfair to truly call this a fish-bearing stream, that
I'd have to agree with that, given what I've read.
yeah, so there are considerations and constraints that this property and some of its neighbors deal with that really warrant that kind of clause in the variance criteria that put it on a different playing field than other properties that have to develop. And the fact that Isaac's comments and the new guideline really looks at the quality and the water quality impacts to streams and water bodies is founded on, you know, much better science that we have now even than just a few years ago before those guidelines were updated. But in retrospect, when David and I were having this conversation and looking at the applicant's proposal, while my gut as a planner is to say that the site really needs to have multiple site plans to evaluate, we are not necessarily going to gain much by running them through those additional reviews and those efforts, because the constraints are you can't get to the developable portion of this property without impacting the slough. The fact that the entire developed area will go through a engineered stormwater facility means that it's likely, I mean, you could literally probably get an engineer to explain to you how it is going to be better after than before when you're looking at water quality. The applicant is doing as much as they can, except for there's, I guess it is the westernmost portion of that parking lot could be shaved off where it's the closest, to put it at about 40 feet, and it doesn't appear to be in the way of parking or truck maneuvering. If they're willing to accept that, the only other thing that I'm primarily concerned about, Fish and Wildlife and the tribe were concerned about, are the legacy oaks that are on the site. And the applicant has indicated that they're doing everything they can. They revised the plans to save those. And Fish and Wildlife recognizes that those are still a concern. The one comment I would like to add is the finding or the condition. They had proposed potentially using pavers for the sidewalk improvements. I believe the Public Works Department is going to be concerned about the ongoing maintenance, and for that, because as the roots shift or the soils shift, that those pavers will be affected and it'll affect ADA. While I don't think that that would be problematic if the applicant is willing to commit to that ongoing maintenance, I would think the simpler solution would be for the final engineering to include something like a elevated boardwalk over the root zone. It wouldn't have to be big. It wouldn't have to be high. It doesn't have to be high enough that it creates, you know, a need for railings or those type of things to be on the edge of the road or even against the right-of-way. So it could be, you know, 1 or 2 inches could make the difference for creating a stable slab to go over that
1 or 2
root
inches
zone.
of height.
Yep, yep. So there doesn't really need to be that much clearance under it, just enough for the roots to not have to be dug into or explored.
That
That
makes
would
sense.
help address Fish and Wildlife's long-term viability of the roots and the root zone that might be affected by even putting in pavers. So other than that, I think it warrants David's recommendation for approval.
Okay. I just wondered if any changes to the conditions were warranted based on DFW's letter. I think the applicant's letter addresses the issues pretty directly.
Yeah. And I believe just modifying that finding slightly. It could be something that can be settled at final engineering, because they're gonna need to do road frontage improvement.
Which
and
finding?
Final engineerings. I'm sorry, I don't know that number off the top of my head.
Related to the sidewalk?
Sidewalk.
Improvements.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, maybe,
Yeah, I can.
is there a condition? That's probably more of a concern for me.
Yeah, it's. I
Needs
can.
to be modified.
Even if you come to a verbal agreement to that today, we could draft a condition of approval and send it to you
That'd be
if you
great.
left the
Yes.
Yeah, that might be
record
the
open.
best way to do it. Okay, thank you. The applicant's opportunity.
Good afternoon.
They don't make those for tall people, do they?
Nope. Afternoon. Scott Taylor with SGA Engineering, representing the applicant. I am the land use planner and landscape architect for the project. I also have Jason Matos, project engineer with SGA, available for any questions. We appreciate staff's time and Mr. Examiner's time today for this variance request and associated permits, critical area review, and site plan review that go hand in hand. A little other history on this project. Like staff mentioned, we did look at additional layouts with the pre-app, and subsequently after the pre-app and before we submitted for site plan review, and trying to maximize the use of the site and create enough buffer around Gorge Slough to improve the function of that buffer. As staff and our sub-consultants have mentioned in the reports, there's not a lot of vegetation beyond the top of the bank. It's mown grass. There's a lot of reed canary grass is one other invasive species that will be removed, and lots of blackberries. The row of western red woods on site are not native, but do thrive in this climate. They were planted by a previous property owner long, long ago, and are outside of the immediate slough area. There's a number of large broken limbs on the ground, and some actually stabbed into the ground from breaking out with windstorms and falling. And so, as far as a safety concern, is one of the main reasons for removal of those large trees. It would be nice to keep them, but it does not work with an industrial site plan and truck and human traffic underneath. There's two existing access ways that come into the site, two gravel crossings, and so those are both being removed in favor of one centrally located crossing. This was also driven by site distance requirements. When you leave the site currently at either of the two locations, you cannot really see around the corner. There's a bend in the road at the center of this site. And so we researched and evaluated that on site, took some measurements, and by locating our new driveway in the center of the site, we have ideal 350-foot site distance looking to the east and the west. And this is a primarily industrial traffic area. There's some homes out there, but a lot of big trucks. And trucks will be entering and exiting the site. Not at high volume. This is a distribution warehouse or a manufacturing warehouse. And so I don't think it's going to have as much volume as an Amazon center or something with hundreds of trucks a day. We're talking ones and twos. And so the new site access location is definitely the best from a safety perspective. It did create some more impacts, but we're also able to upsize the culverts to two 36-inch culverts. Unfortunately, the CDID number 2 was not interested in ownership or maintenance of this portion of the slough. We reached out to them a number of times, and historically, the previous property owner never wanted anybody to step foot on this site. And so therefore, there was no mowing or maintenance done in the slough for 20 plus years. So that is what has created the current growth on site. A lot of willows and cottonwoods and other volunteer plants from the birds. And erosion, things carrying downstream. So the improvement of drainage will definitely take place. The stormwater on site will definitely enhance the site's runoff treatment. Currently, the water from the roadway on Guild Road runs directly into the slough. There is no catchment or treatment of that stormwater. And so we're going to be putting in curb and gutter, and that'll help catch that stormwater and filter that to a specific location and not just continuous runoff. We can look at any kind of treatment for that. We're not adding any impervious surface to the roadway. We're proposing to do a few less feet of roadway width in order to stay further from these oak trees and also attach the sidewalk instead of detaching it like it is just to the north. Recent improvements were done along the entire north side of the road with a detached sidewalk, street lights, hydrants. The industrial development just to the north has done quite a bit of work. And so we think there's actually quite a bit of value and life left in that roadway, but we wouldn't know until we do a thump test. And so one item that we would like to add to condition of approval number 5, which is also the general condition that talks about half-street improvements, curb gutter, attached sidewalk, street lighting, and landscaping. We would like to add, I don't know if it's going to be a separate condition or if it would just be a second sentence under this same condition 5. Applicant requests to perform a thump test to evaluate the life expectancy of Guild Road. It would be
Is that what it's called, a thump test?
a thump. Yeah, so I think
Okay.
they do that where they'll go out and core the road.
Okay. Yeah. 5-year wear surface kind of test. That's
Yeah,
what
see
I've
if it
seen
has at
before.
least 5
Never heard of
years.
a thump test, but it makes perfect sense.
That's the working name of it.
Yeah, okay.
And
So you want
so,
applicant request to conduct a thump test for, could you finish that
yeah,
sentence again?
for Guild Road
Uh-huh,
to confirm the life expectancy of the existing asphalt.
okay,
And what we need to do is confirm that we're not going to dig up and rebuild roadway that's not necessary,
sure.
because that could further affect oak trees and
Okay,
And then working with staff, we think that there's definitely opportunities to either use pavers or an elevated boardwalk type sidewalk to minimize impacts to tree roots. We don't want to limit ourselves to just an elevated boardwalk. We'd like to definitely discuss it with Public Works staff and confirm whether pavers are a viable option or a maintenance challenge. And then also maybe some additional site work to confirm, if there is tree roots present right at the surface. Right now, there's existing roadway and then gravel, and it goes into the slough. We'll be adding a 6-inch tall curb, and so that's another 6 inches of height that we'd be above the existing gravel. And so we're optimistic that pavers could work. The arborist was in support of that, but then we recognize there's other options, and the boardwalk option might work as well. We just want to keep the options open for final engineering. And then staff's recommendation of a 40-foot wide buffer, base buffer, instead of the varying 26 to 50 foot. We feel that that can be achieved with adjustments to the site plan. I don't know if there is a specific condition of approval we need to look at.
yeah, I didn't see one, I was looking, but,
So maybe an added condition.
26D. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. So right now, I have 26 ABC.
there we go.
So is there an existing D?
Yeah.
There should be.
Oh, okay,
Yes, mine.
please. Perfect, that works.
Thanks.
think everything else has been discussed. One other item, which is in the memo from our arborist, instead of Douglas fir trees, they recommend cherry or red alder trees, or even big leaf maples, instead of fir trees. Fir trees often shade out Oregon white oaks, and so they don't want that competition. I mean, it would take 40, 50 years to get that tall, but they're thinking long range, which is fine. I
And
believe
you're
that-
okay with a condition that basically change the firs to something else smaller?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, a native deciduous species, I think, is the best way to put it.
Native, yeah, okay.
I think that's all we want to provide. Do you have any questions for us?
Mr. Goddard suggested that, well, hold the record open for a short period so that the city can submit a revised condition for the boardwalk paver issue. Do you guys, would that work for you? I get,
Yeah.
if,
Maybe just 2 days?
yeah.
That
Yeah,
works fine for us.
and if you and the city want to suggest some language, I'm sure you guys can work something out, but I think what you're proposing is, appears to work. Mr. Goddard, any issues with that?
So, condition number 30 talks about using best practices available for protection of the Oregon oaks, and then 31 and 32, and also, I believe it's 27, talk about the final engineering process. So I don't know that we necessarily need to hold it open for additional
Okay.
language.
If
I-
the city's comfortable with that, is the applicant comfortable with that? That language that we have is flexible enough?
Or
Yes.
Okay.
if you want to take a look at those, maybe an addition of 26, the one we had talked about previously for variances, E, you might want to add one after D that we had just talked about for the 40-foot riparian buffer.
Mhm.
You could potentially add it there, and that way the other two are not going to be affected because they still have to meet final engineering, so.
But does it relate to the variance?
Yeah, I think 30 really covers it best. I
Yeah.
didn't see or read that close enough, I guess, and I think that's a great catch. It covers it. It is a best practices available, and during construction as well as following completion. So it covers timing, and then item 31, condition 31, also covers engineering plans being submitted and reviewed. So instead of adding a 26E, I think I'm comfortable with leaving it how it is. That sounds great.
That works for me. As long as it allows these options to be explored between the city and the applicant.
Yeah.
Because I think there's other considerations too on the boardwalk that we might want to talk about.
Yeah.
Maintenance-wise. Maintenance either
And
way.
you're not on the record, I don't know if it doesn't matter, it's
No,
fine.
I don't.
Okay,
Sorry.
no, that's fine. There's nobody else here.
Yeah, so official on the record, and we're comfortable with keeping the staff report as is and it
Okay.
not keeping the open record.
Okay, thank you. There's no one else in the room, and there doesn't appear to be anyone else online. I'll check with staff to confirm. Nobody? Okay, so with that, there's nobody to respond. Anything further from the city?
I think we are good.
Okay. Mr. Taylor, anything from the applicant? Okay, with that, I'll close the public portion of the hearing, and I will approve this application subject to the conditions recommended in the staff report with change to, was there a change to 26D? No, that covers that. Oh, Mr. Goddard or Mr. Lucchese, is the city okay with the added condition adding to condition 5 or adding another condition that regarding the thump test?
I don't know that we necessarily need to add a condition to go to the thump test. I think ultimately it comes down to a final engineering discussion and whether the public works director feels the road needs to be replaced or not. And that might justify making that decision one way or the other, but I don't think we need to change the conditions of approval to make it a requirement.
Mr. Taylor, any?
No, I think we're good. We're on
Okay.
As the idea is seed is planted, and we'll work through that civil review.
Okay.
finally.
I'm gonna look at the conditions. If there's anything about the EV parking, I'll make sure it has the right number. If it doesn't, state law is pretty clear, it's 10%. So 5 are required. With that, I will approve the application subject to those conditions, and I will try and get this out within a maximum of 2 weeks. We'll probably get it out sooner. I'll send it to the city will send it to party to record, which is the applicant. That concludes our hearing. Thanks. Wish they were all this easy.